What's up, dingus? For this table, I'm going to be making the eggs that... the eggs? For this table, I'm going to be making the legs that are an X. I don't know what they're called, but a friend of mine asked me to make her a table, and that was the style she was looking for. Instead of using math, I've got my foot on it right there, so I can measure for the height of the table, and then I know where I need to cut my other 45. I set a positive stop on my miter saw so I knew all the legs would be the same exact length. Then I could make my first cut and then just slide my board down to the positive stop and make my second cut. That way I knew I'd have a perfect length for every single board. Right here I'm measuring to find something, so you don't forget, Nick. You measured from here all the way to here. That is 38 3/4. You divide 38 3/4 in half, and you get 19 3/8. I took this scrap piece and I scribed the line at 19 3/8. I'm going to cut that on the miter saw. When you cut a 45-degree angle, the length from here to here is going to be the same width as from here to here, which for me is 4 3/4. So this right here is also 4 3/4. It's a square. So I cut this to 19 3/8. I left 4 3/4 in the middle. I'll line this up, make a line, then line this up on the same board on the other side, make a line. Now this should line up perfectly in between. And it does. Same thing on the next board. Now when I cut my half lap joint, this will sit right inside of that. And it'll be perfect. Oh, well, thank God that's over. Let's see. For fuck's sake. This board is 1 3/4, which means 7/8, right? So this board is 1 3/4 inch thick, which means we want to set this blade to 7/8. We want it 7/8 off of the sled. That looks right to me. We're going to do a test cut just to make sure. Make 2 test cuts, let's see. Alright, that's it. That's the cut. So let's do it. After all that, I was able to go ahead and make my half lap cuts using my table saw sled and setting the blade to half the thickness of that board. I'm assuming I already said that in the past part, but honestly I wasn't paying attention. I put some glue in my half lap joint and then I put the 2 pieces together and clamped it tight. By using a 45-degree angle for the top and the bottom, I was able to use a 90-degree angle for the half lap joint, and that'll make it meet up perfectly. The next morning I came out and I used this piece of wood as a straight edge and drew lines from corner to corner. I cut this board to 2 3/8, which is half the width of this, so I can get a nice straight line right down the middle. Make this into a box and remove that so you can slide the stretcher through. I used a Forstner bit to drill out the center of that box that I just drew. I have this Dremel tool that has this straight blade for cutting molding. I believe that's what it's for anyway. I saw Jimmy DiResta use this technique in the past, but he used a steel block. I don't have one. I had a wooden block. It worked. It was good enough. But you keep the blade flush with the wooden block as you come down, and it helps you create a straight cut for the start of your cuts. This method worked great. I was able to get halfway through, turn it over, do the other half, and then just use a chisel to clean it all out afterwards. Alright, we're outside now, and I'm about to cut this tabletop that I made years ago out of some barn beams that I was given. I sent the picture to my friend to see if they liked that top, and she said yes, that looked great. And then she told me the dimensions, which was a little bit smaller than this table, so I had to cut the ends off, but no big loss. I was happy to see this tabletop finally go because I've always loved it. I measured it out and I used my track saw, but you could definitely use a circular saw and a straight edge to get this done. So I cut the stretcher that was going to connect the two cross legs through that mortise or tenon. Through the hole. That one was going to go into the hole like this. Then I drew an X on the end of that stretcher to find a center. I drilled a tiny little hole into the center. And I stick this through here. This is my reference piece. Boink. Like that. Then stick this into the center hole here. And I'm just going to trace it. It's centered right on this because I got a center hole here, center hole on this, stick the thing right through it, connect the two, and there we go. Now we want to remove all these edges. I set my blade height to line up right with the line right here. You see that line? See how it's lined up with the little blade here? And we're going to run it through over and over again until we have it all cleared out. Instead of having to remove 1/8 of an inch at a time with the saw blade, I was able to just drag that piece of wood across the saw blade because it was such a shallow cut, and just skim away that bit that I needed. After that, I slid that tenon into the mortise, or mortise into the tenon, whatever it happens to be. I was very excited to see it all fit together, as you can tell. Now it was time to attach these legs to the base. And I wanted them to be able to come off because this table is incredibly heavy. The top of this table is about 3 inches thick. So I decided to cut out some blocks that will glue and screw to the bottom of this tabletop, and then I will bolt the legs to the pieces that I glued and screwed to the tabletop bottom. Just watch the fucking video. You'll know what I'm talking about. I glued and screwed one for each piece of the table legs. As you can see, I am drilling a hole straight through the table legs and that table top bottom part. So to figure out where to cut the opposite 45 to hit the bottom of the table, I screwed this little piece of scrap wood on to represent the bottom of the table. So I'm going to line this up where it needs to go on the stretcher. Now I'll cut both of them, the right and the left, over on the chop saw. So now we gotta cut the same 7/8 because that's how long or wide this is. We need to remove 7/8 from this so it'll sit flush. Just like before, we're just gonna make multiple passes, but this time we don't go all the way to the end. We go from line to line. So I'll cut 2 lines first, and then go back and empty out the middle. So now I'm cutting the half lap joints for the 45s that I was talking about to give it extra support. Same as all the other half lap joints, set the blade to half the lap. Half the lap? Half the lap? Set the blade to half the depth and just overlap them. So I secured everything down before I put these blocks in. Cut a half lap joint here, half lap joint here. I'm going to glue and screw this down and then put a hole through here for it to bolt to. So these legs will be fully removable. Time to make 2 benches. I brought these big old barn beams into my shop and started pulling out all the old nails. I wanted these bench tops to match the same thickness as the top of the table, so I had to rip them on my table saw, flipping them end to end and raising my table saw blade a little bit at a time until I could remove that whole part and get the same thickness as the tabletop. Pre-drilling some holes that I'm going to be filling with dowels later, and I'm going to screw and glue these 2 pieces of wood together to create the bench top. Brought it over to my miter saw and cut a square end on both sides. So I don't really have much of a plan other than trial and error. I'm sure there's a math equation to this. Feel free to call me stupid in the comments and tell me how it's done. So I think we need like a 30-degree angle. Let's try 30. So by using this, I'm basically about to create a template. I laid out a straight edge here, push these up against it, figured out my line here, trace it on. This is the top, this is the bottom. Got to cut 4 to this length at that size. I'm going to cut this piece and cut that piece and get rid of the middle. It'll help me draw my lines on my actual legs for where my half-lap joints need to go. So it looks as though this is a 22.5 angle. This needs to be a 45 to get it flat. So with the other one, this was a 45-degree angle and this needed to be a 90-degree angle to make it flat. Looks like you have to double it. Double this angle for the crisscross to make this level or parallel. Oh. So the next thing I did was cut those half lap joints, and then it was time to glue and screw those table legs together. And after they were glued and screwed together, I put dowels into all the holes that I had all over this table. I attached these legs to the bottom of the table. Once those were attached, it was time to give everything a quick sand. I dragged this thing down into my basement so it was warm enough and put like 5 coats of poly on it. I have no footage of me doing the poly because, I mean, do you really need to see that? Who cares? I used Helmsman polyurethane, and I used a foam roller, which I had never done before. And I was so happy with the way this table turned out. Honestly, this is one of my favorite tables I've ever made. The customer was thrilled with it, and there you go. You can see it right there. Please like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, and I will see you in the next one. And thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Later.
Bye. See you again, and have a good dream.